Hey cookie creators and lovers alike, I'm Gabby. What's Christmas without movies like Rudolph, Frosty, and the Grinch Who Stole Christmas? So today on the Cool Cookie Show, we're making classic Christmas movie characters. For Frosty the Snowman, I'm going to start by flooding the gray part of his hat and the light blue center of his flower. For my piping consistency icings, I'll be using number 1 Ateco tips. And for my 15-second consistency flooding icings, I'll be using number 3 Wilton tips. Now we'll let these layers dry for 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and do some more flooding. Now I'll let these layers dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before I go in and do some more flooding. Now we'll let these layers dry for 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and flood his nose and his mouth. Now I'll let these layers dry for 6 to 12 hours before I go in and complete his piping and give him that twinkle in his eye. This jolly happy soul is all done. For the Grinch, I'm going to start by flooding the green in his face and the red in his Santa hat. For my piping consistency icing, I'll be using number 1 Ateco tip. And for my 15-second consistency flooding icing, I'll be using a number 2 Wilton tip. Now we'll let this layer dry for 20 minutes to an hour before we go flood the white part of his Santa hat and the yellow in his eyes. Now I'll let these layers dry for 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and flood his eyebrows and add some piping detail. This guy's all set to steal Christmas. For Rudolph, I'm going to start by flooding the brown parts of his face. For my piping consistency icing, I'll be using a number 1 Ateco tip. And for my 15-second consistency flooding icing, I'll be using a regular squeeze bottle that's about the size of a number 3 Wilton tip. Now we'll let this layer dry for 20 minutes to an hour before we go fill in the other elements. Now I'll let the black around his eye dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before I go in and flood the white. Now I'll let this layer dry for 6 to 12 hours before I go in and flood the blacks of his eyes, his mouth, and attach his shiny red nose. For Rudolph's bright red nose, I've gone ahead and made a smaller cookie that'll attach to the bigger cookie later. I'm going to completely pipe the nose in red and then dunk it into some sanding sugar for that classic shine. Now we'll let these layers dry for 6 to 12 hours before we attach his shiny red nose and give him some twinkle in his eye. Rudolph is all done and ready to light the way for Santa's sleigh. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Cool Cookie Show. If you liked this episode, give it a big thumbs up. Want to be a part of the creativity? Let me know what characters and shapes you'd like to see in the comments below. For more of my cookie creations, check out my channel, tune in every Tuesday, and don't forget to subscribe. Till next time, stay sweet!